It was December 16th, 1838. The sun had not yet risen above the gentle curve of the South African veld. Along the banks of a shallow, winding stream, later to be called the Encombe River, a group of weary travelers began to prepare for what they feared would be their final morning. They were the Voortrekkers, Dutch-speaking settlers who had left the British-controlled Cape Colony to seek new lands in the interior. For months, they had journeyed eastward across plains and mountains, their wagons creaking, oxen trudging, children and elders following under the hot sky. They sought freedom, but their arrival brought them into the domain of one of Africa's most disciplined and formidable nations, the Zulu Kingdom. Across the hills that morning, some 20,000 Zulu warriors waited, strong, confident, and united under their king, Dingane Kasenzangakona, successor to the legendary Shaka Zulu. The stage was set for one of the most famous and controversial battles in African colonial history, the Battle of Blood River. What happened that day would shape not only the destiny of the Zulu Kingdom and the Voortrekker settlers, but also the identity of South Africa itself, echoing across generations as both a story of survival and a painful reminder of conquest and division. To understand the Battle of Blood River, one must first return to the years preceding it, to the age of migration and upheaval that transformed southern Africa. In the early 1800s, the British had taken control of the Cape Colony, introducing new laws and policies that alienated many Dutch-speaking farmers, known as Boers. Dissatisfied with British authority, particularly over land ownership and the abolition of slavery, thousands began what became known as the Great Trek, moving inland to establish independent communities beyond colonial control. Meanwhile, the Zulu Kingdom, founded by Shaka around 1816, had grown into a dominant regional power. Shaka's military innovations, the short-stabbing spear, the regimented impi formations, and the age-grade system had revolutionized warfare across southern Africa. After Shaka's assassination in 1828, his half-brother Dingane ascended to the throne, inheriting both power and tension. When the Voortrekker leader Piet Retief arrived in Zulu territory in 1838, he sought to negotiate land in what is now KwaZulu-Natal. Retief met with Dingane at his royal kraal, Umgungundlovu, presenting gifts and promises of friendship. But the meeting ended in betrayal. After initial cordiality, Dingane accused Retief of deceit. Retief and his 70 followers were seized, taken to a nearby hill, and executed, their bodies left to decay. In the weeks that followed, Zulu impis attacked Voortrekker camps throughout Natal. Men, women, and children were killed in what the settlers called massacres. The Voortrekkers, devastated and enraged, prepared for retaliation. Under a new leader, Andries Pretorius, they began assembling a Laager, a circular fortress of wagons, on the banks of the Encombe River. Here, they would make their stand. In the early hours of December 16, 1838, mist hung low over the valley. The Voortrekkers, Laager, 70 wagons locked wheel to wheel, formed a rough semicircle against the bend of the river. Behind it, they had dug shallow trenches and positioned oxen within the enclosure. There were 470 men, armed with muskets and a few small cannons. Each man carried between 40 and 50 rounds of ammunition. They prayed quietly as dawn approached. Their leader, Andries Pretorius, moved among them, offering calm words and final instructions. The night before, the men had made a solemn vow that if God granted them victory, they would commemorate the day forever as one of thanksgiving. Across the veld, the Zulu army gathered in immense numbers, an estimated 20,000 warriors, drawn from multiple regiments, each under its own induna, or commander. They carried spears and cowhide shields, arrayed in Shaka's famous horns of the bull formation, the chest to engage, the horns to encircle, and the loins as reserve. At sunrise, the sound of Zulu war songs began to rise, rhythmic, haunting, and fierce. From behind the wagons, the Voortrekkers could see the dark mass advancing through the mist. Pretorius ordered his men to hold fire until the Zulu were within close range. The first volley erupted, a thunderous crack that rolled across the plain. Dozens of warriors fell. The Zulu pressed forward, fearless, their shields raised. Again and again, the settlers reloaded and fired, their movements practiced and desperate. The air filled with smoke. The Zulu reached the wagon barricades, hurling spears and attempting to breach the circle. But each time they approached, concentrated gunfire drove them back. The Voortrekkers' disciplined firing lines, rotating in sequence, created a relentless rhythm of musket fire. After nearly 2 hours of assault, Pretorius gave the signal for a countercharge. Mounted men rode out through the narrow openings in the Laager, sabers drawn, cutting through disoriented warriors. The Zulu ranks wavered, then began to withdraw. As they retreated toward the river, the scene turned tragic. The Encombe ran red with blood, so much so that the site became known thereafter as Bloed Rivière, Blood River. By late morning, the battle was over. Nearly 3,000 Zulu warriors lay dead or dying along the banks. Only 3 Voortrekkers were lightly wounded. None were killed. The disparity was extraordinary and devastating. When the gunfire faded, silence descended over the valley. The settlers, exhausted and shaken, gathered for prayer. Their vow had been fulfilled, a day of survival and of faith rewarded. But in that stillness, one might imagine the heavy sorrow that lingers after such violence, a silence that spoke of loss beyond victory. Pretorius's men spent the next 2 days tending to the wounded and burying the dead. The Zulu bodies, far too many to enter, were left on the field. The river's waters carried the stains downstream, mingling with the reeds. In the days that followed, the surviving Zulu regiments retreated to report their defeat. Dingane's authority faltered. Rival factions rose, and within a year, his half-brother Mpanda defected, aligning himself with the Voortrekkers. Together, they marched on Umgungundlovu, overthrowing Dingane and installing Mpande as king, an act that effectively divided the Zulu kingdom. The Voortrekkers established their own short-lived republic in Natal, which they saw as fulfillment of divine providence. To them, the battle symbolized protection and destiny. For the Zulu, it was a catastrophe, a turning point that marked the beginning of the erosion of their independence. Over time, the Battle of Blood River became a foundation of Afrikaner identity. The vow made before battle was commemorated annually as the Day of the Vow, later renamed the Day of Reconciliation after South Africa's transition to democracy. Yet, as with all histories, meaning depends on perspective. For many Zulu, the battle was not divine judgment, but tragic loss, one among many struggles for sovereignty during a time of immense upheaval. Modern historians now approach Blood River with empathy for both sides, settlers seeking refuge from empire, and Africans defending their ancestral lands. The numbers, the tactics, and the terrain all remain points of analysis. But beyond the statistics lies a human story of fear, courage, and survival. The victory at Blood River owed less to divine miracle than to preparation and circumstance. Pretorius's tactical discipline, the wagon laager, and superior weaponry gave the Voortrekkers a decisive defensive advantage. Flintlock muskets, though slow to reload, were devastating at short range when fired in volleys. The Zulu, meanwhile, fought with unmatched bravery, but faced immense disadvantages. Their spears and shields could not penetrate the wagon circle. Their approach across open terrain exposed them to sustained gunfire, and their traditional tactics, designed for close combat, proved ineffective against a fortified position. However, the battle must be seen within its broader social and political context. The Voortrekkers were migrants displaced by colonial change. The Zulu were a sovereign nation resisting intrusion. Each side believed in the righteousness of its cause. Thus, Blood River stands not merely as a military encounter, but as a symbol of a world in transition, where traditional African warfare met industrial age firepower, and where two communities, both seeking freedom, collided in misunderstanding and tragedy. In the immediate aftermath, the balance of power in southern Africa shifted dramatically. Dingane's fall ended the centralized authority Shaka had once forged. Mpande's reign brought temporary stability, but the Zulu kingdom would never again possess the same unity or expansionist energy. For the Voortrekkers, Blood River became both triumph and justification. They saw their victory as a sign of divine favor, strengthening their resolve to build independent Boer republics, first in Natal, then in the Orange Free State and Transvaal. Yet, beneath that triumph lay new divisions. Conflict with the British resumed, and tension with indigenous communities continued. The memory of Blood River hardened identities, forming mythologies that would later influence South African politics for generations. Today, historians reinterpret the battle as part of a shared heritage rather than a divisive one. The Encombe Blood River Heritage Site now includes memorials to both sides. The wagon laager reconstructed in stone, facing a modern Zulu memorial shaped like shields. Two narratives, once opposed, now stand together, silent witnesses to reconciliation. As evening falls over the Encombe Plain today, the river runs quietly once more. Grass sways where thousands once fought. The air holds no echo of musket fire or war cries, only the sound of the wind and the hum of insects in the reeds. History, like the river, flows onward, carrying both memory and meaning. From the dust of Blood River rose new nations, new struggles, and new understandings of identity. And as South Africa continues to reckon with its past, this story of courage, tragedy, and endurance reminds us how even in the harshest moments of history, the human spirit seeks reconciliation.